Good morning. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the unapologetically progressive Sunday morning political news show for Indiana. Our opening theme is by Hoosier singer-songwriter Leslie Nuss, and my name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I'm broadcasting from Bloomington. This week, Trump wages economic war on enemies and allies alike. Climate catastrophe wreaks havoc in the Himalayas while Indiana recovers from its own. Meta settles in a groundbreaking lawsuit, and Indiana's 4 Secretary of State candidates spar on the debate stage. All that and more. But before we begin, you know the drill. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We don't have billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network refuse to hide important information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even if that's not in our financial best interest. So please, if you find value in this work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 for the year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And if a paid subscription isn't in the cards for you right now, that is okay. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding our content to your people. Get us when you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making this state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. Follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, we are at PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Now, let's welcome this week's guest. 2 returning regulars for your viewing and listening pleasure. First, she's the Democratic candidate for State House District 81 up there in Fort Wayne. Welcome back to the show, Sharon Wight. Sharon, welcome.
Good morning. It's good to see you. And it was so good to see you last week in the flesh at French Lick. That was a lot of fun.
I had a blast down there. I've been so busy this week catching up on everything else. I don't have all my interviews from the porch edited. I know I owe those to some candidates. I promise I'm going to get those out in the next few days. Be patient with me, please. So let us also welcome in another one of my favorite people and returning guest. He is an activist and a political writer, the author of the Reese's Piece Substack. It is Reece Axel-Adams. Reece, welcome.
Good morning. I, unlike Sharon, was not able to see you at French Lick. I have opinions on French Lick. I think it's a bit hoity-toity, but yeah.
Not my scene exactly, but I was grateful for the invite, and I got to meet some really great people there.
I was a little surprised that they invited you. Not gonna lie.
Well, and
I was on my best behavior.
He really was. I had the opportunity to stay at a Airbnb with a bunch of Indiana Rural Summit folks, and that was an absolute blast. We were right off site. We were able to drive very easily back and forth, and it was a very, I think all of us that were staying in the same space would say that it was a very bonding experience. And so we didn't do as much of the hoity-toity, as you might say. We hung out in our Airbnb a lot when we weren't in conference and just talked and got to know each other better, which was a lot of fun.
With all these things, they are what you make of them, right? So guys, listen, we've got a ton to get to today, so let's go ahead and dig into this. And I want to start with a story from the New York Times that came out last Sunday. That was by Maggie Haberman and Annie Carney. Now, the authors report House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries met in secret recently with Trump son-in-law Jared Kushner. They suggest the meeting signals an awareness within Trump's circle that Democrats are likely to win back Congress in November, and the sides are looking for areas they could work together. Jeffries, under fire from his left, defended the meeting, saying the two talked about ways to solve the affordability crisis. and also said Kushner could still be a target of oversight investigations in a Democratic House. Now, apparently the men have a working relationship dating back to Trump's first term, where they collaborated on criminal justice reform, but Kushner has no official role in the administration. He does have a significant portfolio of unofficial diplomatic duties, however, negotiating on Iran, Gaza, and Ukraine. Now, Reece, many on the left, including myself, are taken aback by this meeting, particularly that it was held in secret. Are you mad, bro?
Yes and no. I don't like the optics that it was held in secret. I don't like the optics that it was held with Jared Kushner, who, laundry list, does not have an official position in the administration. My stance on it, it's always good to meet with the opposition because, I mean, they're going to have to govern. If Democrats win back Congress, they're going to have to govern with the Trump administration. I don't like that it was held in secret. I don't like that it was held specifically with Kushner. And I don't like that Jeffries doesn't really have a great explanation for why and who it was with.
I wanted to ask about that. Do you buy his story that they were talking about affordability? That's not exactly in Kushner's purview.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Kushner is the special envoy for Middle East peace, and so I would find it really hard to believe that they didn't talk about Israel and Gaza. Could they have talked about affordability? Who knows? But it's hard to buy anything that a lot of career politicians say, especially with the track record career politicians tend to have.
Yeah, so we do know, again, the cover story is affordability. But what we do know is that Kushner has vast business interests in the Middle East, particularly with Saudi Arabia. He also has deep family ties to the Netanyahu regime in Israel, so close that a teenage Kushner once gave up his bedroom to a visiting Netanyahu who stayed at the family's home on a U.S. visit. Now, between his financial and personal interests, many people accuse the Trump son-in-law of essentially acting as an unregistered agent of the Israeli government. And wouldn't you know it, just days after this story dropped, Jeffries' ally Gregory Meeks named 3 Israel hawks to important House Foreign Affairs subcommittees, including self-identified DeSantis Democrat Jared Moskowitz to the Middle East Subcommittee. Moskowitz has expressed unconditional support for Israel, refuses to insist the country comply with international law, and actually finds himself further to the right than Vice President J.D. Vance on Middle East issues. Also promoted were Florida Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Missouri's Wesley Bell. Between those 3 and Jeffries, they have taken well over $20 million in contributions from AIPAC. Sharon, am I reading too much into this?
I don't think so. I mean, they're candidates right now are very much either you take AIPAC money or you absolutely refuse to take AIPAC money. By the way, I'm one of those that's refusing to take any AIPAC money. Not that any has been offered to me, but I refuse. But it's not just about, I actually looked into Hakeem Jeffries' finances probably about a month ago. I was having a debate with somebody and I can't remember who it was. And I was like, and of course I have now figured out how to look up such things. So I did. And I'm like, oh, at first, it doesn't look like he's actually taken that much. And then you start digging into his PAC and you start digging into other places. And that's where you find it. That's where they hide these things. And the fact that not only, like, if you're going to take it, be open about it. Like, it shouldn't, it's another thing that he is hiding. Interesting to see the name Debbie Wasserman Schultz back in the news because we haven't seen her name very much for the past couple of years, ever since she stepped down from her role as DNC chairperson and started in her role in Congress. So that's an interesting one to see. And to me, it's also interesting that we're seeing Jared Kushner's name back in the news because he and Ivanka have very much laid low this term. At least I thought that was the plan, but it seems like perhaps that laying low is more strategic than we initially thought.
It's a big club right? There are certain things that Democrats like Hakeem Jeffries and his allies, and Democrats across the spectrum will argue with the Trump administration about. But there's other things that the political class in this country, no matter what side of the aisle, all seems to agree on. And it is unconditional support for Israel, unconditional support for billionaires and the oligarchy. And it is not conducive to the kind of changes we need to see in our country. And especially on the Democratic side, we've seen the polling on this change drastically in the last several years as Israel has undertaken its genocide in Gaza. Most Democrats want to see conditions at least placed on aid, and are withholding support, and have definitely started to side more with the Palestinians who have been victimized by the Israeli government under Benjamin Netanyahu, who is wanted on charges by the International Criminal Court. Reece, I don't know, like, why is it that there are certain things that both sides of the aisle always seem to cooperate on while fighting about things that maybe don't matter as much and are just sort of fringe issues that don't affect most people's day-to-day lives?
Yeah, I mean, being completely honest, the Israel-Palestine issue has been one that I've thought about a lot. And I've come to sort of the conclusion that when it first broke out and sort of up until very recently, it would have been political malpractice to essentially go against Israel, because there have been groups in the United States, like the Alliance Defending Freedom, that have done such an amazing job at intertwining any sort of criticism of the Israeli government with anti-Semitism. I think as pressure is growing and as the conflict continues and Israel's horrendous actions and genocidal actions continue in Gaza, I think we're seeing cracks. But I don't think we're ever truly going to see the conflation with Israeli criticism of the Israeli government equaling anti-Semitism ever truly be unintertwined. I think
it's
that's
a fine
just
line to walk, right?
Yeah.
Because when you start following the money, and a lot of it flows through Israel, and listen, a lot of it flows through Saudi Arabia too. So we don't want to perpetuate these like anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that, like, oh my God, the Jews are controlling the world. No, they're not. The capitalists are controlling the world, and there is an important node in the overall world capitalist machine in Israel, just as there is in the United States, just as there is in Europe, just as there is in a lot of these the Middle Eastern oil countries as well. Sharon, how do we carefully walk that line?
Well, I do. So some of the people who I love most in this world are Jewish, and so I kind of take this I don't take it personally, but I worry about the people who in my life who are Jewish that get intertwined with this conversation, unfortunately, because like Reece said, we've had a couple of generations now where criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism, and we have to work on separating those two things. And as both of you were just speaking, I actually was thinking to myself, it's interesting, we're not talking about Russia anymore. It almost seems like some of that was by design too, because we were talking about Russia pretty regularly for a few years there. We have not seen very much about Russia and the Ukraine war in a while, which I think is also really interesting.
Yeah, and actually, well, we're going to talk about that in a little bit here shortly, because that did come up in the news this week. And it is funny that Netanyahu, in addition to having a great relationship with Trump, also has a really good relationship with Putin.
Mm-hmm.
Reece, you seem like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to Sharon's point about how we haven't seen much about Russia, it's because we live in a 5-second news cycle. Our attention span is like this, and the newest shiny thing, hate to call wars shiny, but like the newest shiny thing for a while was Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and then Hamas attacked Israel, and then Israel, that became the shiny thing, and now the new shiny thing is kind of the whole Iran fuck up, whatever we want to call that. And so it's just like not entirely surprising because we have such short attention spans.
Let's talk about the Iran thing. Glad you mentioned it there, Reece. Let's move on there. And Kushner and his diplomatic partner / Trump golf buddy Steve Witkoff have not been able to negotiate an end to the U.S. stalemate with Iran. Though the two sides have refrained from shooting at each other in recent weeks, the vital Strait of Hormuz remains largely closed. Tanker traffic there is just 15% of what it was before the war. Now, to apply further pressure upon the Islamic Republic, this week Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent unveiled a new round of U.S. sanctions on the country. Dubbed Operation Economic Outcast, the sanctions target digital assets, technology, gold, aviation, and shipping, and apply not just to Iran, but to countries doing business with them. Bessent said Trump is calling world leaders directly, asking them to cut ties with Iran before facing secondary sanctions. Iran's security chief threatened to retaliate against their Persian Gulf neighbors if they cooperate with the sanctioned regime. Not mentioned directly in Bessent's announcement, though, China, who buys nearly 90% of Iran's oil exports. The sanctions do include nearly 60 Iranian-linked entities, including some Chinese and Hong Kong-based individuals and a China-owned oil tanker, but avoided major Chinese banks tied into the U.S. financial system. President Xi Jinping is scheduled to visit the U.S. in September, and analysts say the Trump administration is mostly avoiding conflict with their primary rival leading up to the summit. Now, Sharon, these economic sanctions always only ever seem to hurt the population of the targeted countries and never the regime. And here, they're not even dealing with Iran's main trading partner. How effective can these even be? This just seems like more Trump administration bluster.
It seems like another one of the situations where it's look over here, look at what's happening over here, and then what are they doing on the opposite side? We're going to call out this thing that we're doing when really we're doing this hidden thing over lots of hidden things today. It seems like, which has just been so prevalent in this administration. I gotta say though, they have unlocked the name of these operations. They keep coming up with more and more interesting ways to name things. I just had to be a little bit silly there because my brain can't take it anymore.
Listen, you gotta be silly and laugh occasionally, otherwise you're gonna cry, right? Reece, while Trump's administration seeks to keep companies and countries from profiting while doing business with Iran, Trump personally is profiting off this war. We learned this week of a financial disclosure filed with the Office of Government Ethics in June, wherein Trump disclosed another 1,000 plus stock transactions, including the purchase and sale of stock in energy companies directly affected by the war. In addition to fossil fuel giants like Exxon, Chevron, and ConocoPhillips, Trump also traded defense contractor stocks, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and General Dynamics, conveniently timed around ongoing negotiations and sometimes selling only a day after purchase. Now, while the White House insists Trump's portfolio is independently managed, he has increased his net worth by billions of dollars in the year and a half plus of his second administration. Reece, how much more corruption and self-dealing do his supporters need to see before they bail on him? Or is like the brazen con of it all part of his allure?
I think you hit at something there, the con of it all. And also, I don't think they give a shit. I truly don't. Like, this is not the sort of news that they're going to be getting. This reporting came from CNN. Do you think diehard Trump supporters are reading CNN? Do you think the diehard Trump media networks like Fox News, OAN, News Nation, or Newsmax even mentioned this? Or if they did, it was a passing thing and it was maybe even framed as a good thing? I think this continues to show that we actually need laws surrounding this. For too long, the country has just operated in good faith. We're going to elect people who are good faith people who care about the country and who aren't going to profit off of the stuff that they're doing. Trump's shown that while we can really hope, it's not going to happen. And so going forward, might some of these laws and regulations be redundant and unnecessary? Hopefully, but we still need them nonetheless.
Yeah, so much of what we've done has been based on norms, right? Like none of these things are codified into law, and we rely on the good faith of the people we elect to operate morally. Like, listen, even Trump is flagrantly flouting the actual laws in many places. So I don't know how necessarily those are effective in cases of such brazen corruption either. Let's move on and talk about it's not just our geopolitical enemies that we're waging economic war on. It's also allies. This week, the Trump administration tightened the economic screws on Canada, escalating a full trade war with our neighbors to the north. Talks collapsed last Friday night after U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Nutlick took a hard line on heavy truck and metal tariffs, with the Americans also insisting on the repeal of a law protecting French language content on streaming platforms and what amounts to veto power over Canadian trade with other countries. With negotiations breaking down, Trump announced a 50% tariff on Canadian cars, trucks, and steel. Prime Minister Mark Carney responded with tariffs on about 700 U.S. products beginning September 8th, including aluminum foil, dishwashers, stoves, forestry products, and electronics. The new levies cover about $20 billion per year in U.S. imports, matching the value of Canadian exports hit by U.S. tariffs. Importantly, many of the targeted products were chosen specifically to affect states that voted for Trump. The American president retaliated with a symbolic gesture, signing an executive order directing the U.S. Board of Geographic Names to ensure Lake Ontario is renamed Lake America on all official U.S. records. He earlier pulled the same stunt with the Gulf of Mexico, renaming it the Gulf of America on the first day of his second term. Carney said Canadians will, quote, never stop calling the body of water Lake Ontario. And neither will anybody else. Reece, while the Iran sanctions likely will not move the needle here at home, this trade war with Canada will raise prices for Americans.
Yeah. Well, first, before I answer that or comment on that, I find it a little ironic, Sharon, how you had mentioned that they were really doing a great job with all of these operation names. And then here we're Gulf of America, Lake America. It's like, can we be a little bit more creative?
Not when Trump is specifically involved. Because Trump's specifically involved in this one.
Did you see the Canadian response? I think originally it was Dean Blundell who posted this, but then Ontario Premier Doug Ford shared it. But Blundell said in response to this stunt from Trump that the Canadians are going to change the name of Lake Michigan to Lake Epstein.
I did not see that, good. But I did see some memes around how Canadian geese are now American geese.
I'm trying to figure out how he chose which lake, because all of them border
I
Canada.
think it's specifically because
Ontario
it's Ontario
is the province in Canada. Of course, the province is named for the lake and not the other way around. And frankly, Ontario is a bastardized name of the lake in of itself, like the indigenous people that we're here beforehand, already had a name for the lake, which is not that. But Sharon, this whole thing, like, the man is an 80-year-old toddler all the way down to the diaper. No offense to our incontinent viewers.
Yeah, I mean, I have not, since the very beginning of all of this, 10 years ago, by the way, it's been 10 years that we've been dealing with this nonsense. We got a little bit of a reprieve, but not really, when Biden was in office. I don't understand any of it. Why do we continuously get into fights with our allies, especially with the allies that we share borders with? That just doesn't seem like a good strategy. And again, this goes back to the point that was made earlier in the show. It only hurts the people who live in these countries. It does not hurt Mr. Stock Trades, who is trading stocks as the president of the United States.
Yeah, certainly the world's worst people will continue to profit, even as the American people are pissed off with this. I think Trump's approval rating is down now in the low 30s. These stunts like this are driving up costs for Americans. His base is abandoning him. There are certainly those hardcore cultists out there, but more and more every day. We're seeing over on progressiveindiana.net in the chat over there. Sierra Martin says one of the guys that works with her husband tossed out his Trump hat. We're hearing more and more little stories about that all the time as the economic screws get tightened on all of us. Let us move on. And so, this trade war with Canada and global tariffs driving up prices on goods for Americans, the Iran war driving up energy prices. We have seen over the last 6 months. With an election coming up in just 65 days now, Trump needs to manufacture some good economic news somewhere and maybe artificially drive down that big number on the gas station sign before November 3rd, because if there's one thing American voters respond to, it is fluctuations in the price of fuel. Perhaps to that end, or maybe it's just more old-fashioned self-enrichment, Trump announced Friday night a deal giving the U.S. majority control over a new public-private partnership with rights to develop 17 oil fields in Venezuela, thought to hold over 65 billion barrels of crude. The deal's private partner is North American Blue Energy Partners, controlled by one Alejandro Betancourt, a Venezuelan businessman who has faced international money laundering investigations. The U.S. reportedly pressured Swiss authorities to resolve a legal case which would allow him to travel to close this deal. Critics call the arrangement unconstitutional, warning it could give both the Trump administration and the interim government of Delcy Rodriguez, the unelected successor to Nicolas Maduro, who U.S. forces kidnapped in a January raid, incentive to block a democratic transition. Sharon, I don't know. This looks to me like market manipulation in regards to gas prices going into the election. Could it be that? Could it be that Trump is also personally benefiting from this deal himself?
Oh, I think it's definitely the second one, especially just given what we have seen. Like, Venezuela wasn't even really on anybody's radar even just a year ago, right? We didn't, because the incident with Maduro happened in December. At least the average person, it wasn't on their radar. And we're hearing more and more about these partnerships with Venezuela, which is also, historically a place where certain groups of individuals have moved to in the midst of let's say being exiled from their current location. So it's just a really interesting place that is in the news, because I believe, I might be wrong about this, the beef, was that from Venezuela or was that from Argentina? It was from Argentina. But either way, we're hearing more and more about South America in the news, which is incredibly interesting, given some of the historical implications there.
And this is the Don Roe doctrine, as Trump calls it, right? Like the U.S. behaving more like an overt imperial power in the Western Hemisphere. Reece, market manipulation, blatant corruption, a Trump slush fund with this oil money. Why not both?
I think, personally, I think it's just he likes playing kingmaker. He's a little toddler with his toy soldiers, and he likes putting them where he wants. And oh no, this toy soldier didn't do what he wanted, so whoop, let's replace him with this toy soldier. I think he just likes to be able to have an effect in the world. I mean, granted, who
it's like
doesn't
Risk
want to...
Jr.
Right.
You know?
I was about to say the same thing, is that he just, apparently no one gave him the risk game that he wanted when he was when he was a teenager, when he was in his early 20s. And so now he feels like he needs to do that with our country.
Yeah.
So,
and
yeah,
just,
go ahead, Reece.
You know, going on the Monroe Doctrine, it's ironic because, you know, the conservatives love to point to our founding fathers. George Washington, one of the last things he warned this country about was getting involved in foreign affairs. I don't 100% agree with that. I think complete and total isolation is not good at all. But I think, and I know this has been probably beaten to death, I think George Washington and most of our founding fathers are rolling over in their graves right now, seeing what Trump has done.
Yeah, they certainly warned about things like this. Listen, for all those men's faults, and there were many, they are not perfect. They are not gods we should worship, as far too many Americans do. They offered some important insights into corruption and tyranny, which we are largely seeing come to fruition in the Trump era. Now, so secret meetings between Jeffries and Kushner, under-the-table deals with shady Venezuelan businessmen, and clandestine negotiations seem to be the theme of the show so far. This week, we learned CIA Director John Ratcliffe made a brief, unannounced trip to Moscow. We only found out because open source analysts tracked the C-17 transport plane he took to the Russian capital. President Trump called the visit, quote, semi-routine, whatever that means, but such visits are in fact rare. The last was in 2021 when then-director William Burns warned Moscow the U.S. knew ahead of time of its Ukraine invasion plans just months before Russian tanks crossed the border. Russia has lost nearly 500,000 men, and that's just as of May. While making very little battlefield progress in Ukraine, and U.S. intelligence reportedly fears Russia's weakness could push Putin toward a limited attack on a NATO state to test the alliance's resolve. Earlier this month, the Wall Street Journal reported on a U.S. intelligence assessment warning of just that, finding Putin could launch anything from a cyber attack to a small-scale land incursion between this fall and 2029, reversing an earlier assessment that he wouldn't provoke NATO while engaged in Ukraine. Officials say a weakened, cornered Putin may become more dangerous, citing recent probing incidents, including Russian cruise missiles landing in Poland and drones breaching Romanian airspace. Putin's likely goal, fracturing NATO by testing whether the U.S. would actually respond, especially since Article 5 doesn't clearly cover cyber or hybrid attacks. Now, as it stands, the U.S. and its allies may be in very little shape to ward off such an attack. AP released an exclusive this week in which U.S. and NATO officials now call Patriot missile stocks in Europe, quote, beyond critical. Worse than the Wall Street Journal report just from earlier this month, with the U.S. definitely lacking enough Patriots to stop a sustained Russian ballistic missile attack. The Center for Strategic and International Studies estimates the Iran war has consumed 65% of U.S. Patriot interceptors. Reece, we see the U.S. engaging in a trade war with Canada, threatening to invade Greenland, which is a possession of Denmark, a NATO ally. I don't think that Trump's American government would side with our NATO allies in case of a Russian attack.
Yeah, no, before I go on that, I'll take a page out of Darlene Graham's book and say, I'll be honest here, I'm not that informed on national affairs. National security is not my strong suit. But yeah, I don't think. I think it's dangerous. How does that saying go? The most dangerous tiger is a cornered tiger, and Putin certainly seems to be a cornered tiger right now. I don't have all that much faith that if Putin were to attack one of our NATO allies in the region, that the U.S. would respond in full force. I worry that might not happen because Trump's buddy with Putin, and Trump, has long and hard talked about how NATO is awful and weak and needs to be disbanded unless the NATO president is complimenting him and calling, what was it? He called him like Daddy Trump or something.
Oh, yeah.
And then he likes it, but yeah, I am worried. I think in the modern times, Putin is probably one of the most dangerous people in the world. And if he's cornered and feeling weakened, what does he do next?
I'm not entirely convinced that not only would Trump's U.S. not stand up to Putin, I'm not convinced that he wouldn't work alongside him to dismantle NATO. If you recall the 1930s and before World War II, the Hitler's Germany and Stalin's Russia were arch enemies, but that didn't stop them from signing the Molotov-Ribbentrop Compact and allying with each other to carve up Poland. Could you see Putin and Trump align to carve up Canada over the top of the Arctic Circle there? I'm not convinced he wouldn't do it. I don't know. Sharon, am I a raving conspiracy theorist?
I think we all are at this point a little bit. My head was going to Greenland because that's what he has made the most kind of stink about. I'm for my mental health, I'm not sure I'm going to think about Canada. Cause that is, you just raised the stakes quite a bit. You don't. You only make me speechless usually when we have the accents, and this one, huh?
Yeah, sorry, I made you think about that.
Yeah, that just got really scary.
I'm old enough to remember like the idea of U.S.-Canadian conflict being a silly punchline. What was that movie, Canadian Bacon, with Rick Moranis and John Candy in the 80s, or the South Park movie in 1999, and now like it's real life. I swear we are living in the upside down. I need to move on to our next topic. So, this ill-conceived Iran war and the poor management of the U.S. arsenal we just talked about are major data points demonstrating the poor leadership at the Pentagon under self-styled Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. But I'd like to highlight a trio of personnel decisions that reflect a larger turn away from expertise and impartiality and toward sycophancy and obsequience in the Department of Defense. So first, from the Washington Post, do you remember in March when a pair of Apache helicopters performed a flyby at Kid Rock's Tennessee residence? And I go, we really live in the stupidest timeline. Well, anyway, General Chris Lenev reportedly told then Army Chief of Staff General Randy George that Hegseth wanted the Army's investigation into the unauthorized flyby dropped. George was troubled by the encounter and confided so in colleagues. Hegseth fired George on April 2nd without a public explanation, and Lenev is now acting chief of staff and nominated to formally take over the role. Hegseth has purged over 24 top military officers since January 2025, including multiple Army generals who might otherwise have been considered for the chief of staff job. Now, Sharon, listen, I've been highly critical of the U.S. military's missions most of my adult life, but I've never doubted the competence and loyalty of the people running the show. This purge is, to quote Susan Collins, deeply concerning.
Is she going to write a letter about it?
Sternly worded.
Sternly worded, of course.
But then go ahead and vote for more funding or the replacement generals, right?
Right. Well, and I mean, I saw an article earlier this week that said that we don't have someone who haven't for several months had someone who's in the key role. I don't think it's this chief of staff role. I think it's the next level up. But it is incredibly concerning that now our military is being taken over, essentially, because up till this point they have maintained their integrity. They have been able to push back, and quite frankly, I still think that the individuals who were in these roles did maintain that integrity. It is the individuals that are being it still baffles me that there are so many people in so many different areas, in the law, in the military, in all of these different places that we can find, who are willing to become sycophants for this man. And the fact that this is also happening over Kid Rock and a flyby is not a phrase I ever thought I would say in my lifetime.
1999 is like, what the hell is going on here? And listen, it doesn't stop there, right? So in addition to the fired and forced out generals, Hegseth has also purged journalists at Stars and Stripes, the supposedly editorial independent military newspaper. 3 former staffers there, editor-in-chief Eric Slavin, publisher Max Lederer, and reporter Lara Corte, sued the Pentagon this week, alleging retaliation for their coverage of deteriorating conditions aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln. The complaint says the DoD officials rescinded regulations protecting Stars and Stripes editorial independence in January and imposed new content restrictions in March. Another lawsuit was filed against the U.S. Military Academy at West Point by a former tenured geography professor whose contract was not renewed after refusing an order to remove content on human-caused climate change from his coursework. Dr. Adam Kalkstein, himself a conservative Republican, contends the school's dean ordered the changes last year after Secretary Hegseth said the department, quote, does not do climate change crap, and suggested Kalkstein resign when he refused. The professor argues the material is necessary for national security reasons, including understanding Arctic resource competition and melting sea ice. Reece, willful ignorance of important national security shaping phenomena, refusing to hear important but inconvenient truths from reporters. It is no wonder the U.S. got bent over a barrel by the Iranians in that conflict.
Yeah, I mean, sort of going back to the shakeups we've seen, and this could be me putting on my conspiracy theory hat, I worry about what it's going to do for the next administration. Democrats more than likely are probably going to win the presidential election come 28 unless we somehow royally fuck it up, and we have a history of doing that. So, but the next Secretary of Defense is going to do a lot of purging because Hegseth has put in loyalists rather than competent people, and I worry that that will be something that right-wing media is going to go crazy about. Oh my God, the liberal Democrat socialists are purging the military and putting in. No, we're purging the military, but we're purging them of stupid loyalists who are loyal to the previous regime rather than the United States. But
that seems like a reasonable thing to have a conspiracy about, quite frankly.
Yeah, well, and it's going to need to be done. I mean, we're going to need to take the thing that the Republicans have announced. They wrote down out loud what they were going to do in Project 2025. They talked about purging the federal government of, what they would call people who were disloyal to the Trump regime, right? And populating it with, if they even staffed it at all, people who were Trump sycophants. And, we're seeing the same thing in the military. And it's going to take a large scale undoing of all that if we ever get control of the government back, and we cannot be afraid to go ahead and do the damn thing despite the inevitable criticisms like you were talking about that we will hear. They're gonna scream purge, and we gotta say, yeah, damn right, purge. So I guess let's turn the page, and this retired West Point professor knew and sought to educate his cadets about what we all see happening right before us, the effects of human-caused climate change. Now, this week, another horrifying example. Wednesday, a glacial collapse in the Himalayas triggered massive flash floods and mudslides on the border between China and Nepal, sweeping through mountain communities, inundating a border crossing station, and burying workers in a hydropower tunnel. Nearly 800 people have now been confirmed dead, with more than 3,000 still missing. The U.S. Geological Survey initially registered a magnitude 4.4 earthquake, but later determined it was actually a magnitude 5.2 glacial collapse based on seismic and satellite data, with no earthquake having occurred. At least 19 bridges and roughly 40 kilometers of road were destroyed. Water on the Trishuli River rose as much as 9 meters in just 30 minutes. The same region saw a similar glacial lake flood last year. Researchers say Himalayan glaciers are melting faster, with ice loss rates doubling since 2000. Reece, I don't know if you saw a video of this, like a wall of water and mud and debris just overtaking that border station, people running for their lives only to be swallowed whole. It was really difficult to watch, and demonstrates how small we all are next to the forces of nature. And, the climate change crisis is really going about showing that repeatedly these days.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, I have tried to avoid much climate-related disasters and the floodings that devastated Anderson and Pendleton. I know that's like comparing apples to peas, but I mean, we had a once-in-a-century flood in South Madison and Madison County, and to say that it's not because of human-made climate change is idiotic, is stupid, is plugging one's ears and going, la, 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 I can't see or hear anything. I mean, Pendleton, we've got Fall Creek, which flows into the White River. It's flooded before. It's, but it has never, I cannot remember in my 20 years living in Pendleton ever having to evacuate parts of Pendleton because of flooding. I cannot remember ever having to evacuate parts of Anderson because of flooding. And it is just, I mean, the pictures I have seen come out of Indiana are horrible and heart-wrenching. And I don't even want to try and, to turn a phrase from Sharon earlier, for my mental health, I don't want to try and imagine or even look at the pictures coming from Nepal and coming from these other areas that have been devastated by massive, massive climate disasters.
It just came across my social media feed, and you don't get a chance to turn away if people on the right make fun of us, woke snowflakes for being easily triggered. But it is literally traumatizing and distressing to watch people being killed. That is what is happening, and it's from far away. It's not close up, but you're seeing hundreds of people swept away by this torrent of mud. And if you have any empathy, you put yourself in their shoes and imagine the horror of that coming at you. And it's just scary, Sharon.
I mean, things were. I had also came across my social media feed. It looked like a massive bombing was happening. I mean, buildings have been obliterated. I'm sure that the number of lost is only going to go up. I'm sure that the number of missing is only going to go up. And going back to what Reece said, I mean, Fort Wayne was very, very, very lucky in the storms because everything that was happening was just, I just drove through Anderson last night. We got very, very lucky. And that's something that I've tried to emphasize to people up here, that it could have been us. We have it up in Gary. I think last I saw, people are still without power up in Gary in Northwest Indiana. It happened in Muncie, Anderson, Pendleton. And the thing is, if we had glaciers, if we lived in a mountainous region, what's happening in Nepal could happen to us. And people don't want to accept it. I actually saw that it was a once in 1,000-year flood, not a once in 100-year flood. So we might need to
for Anderson.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, that's the reporting I've been seeing, is that we had a similar flood back in the early 1900s.
Got it. Well, but
yeah, 1913, I believe. Well, and to your point, it maybe used to be 1,000-year flood, then it maybe used to be 1 in 100-year flood. But with climate change, these things are going to happen more and more. Maybe it's once every 20 years. And there's going to be large swaths of the planet where people live now that are going to be made uninhabitable. If you think about those villages in the mountains of Nepal, more of these glacial collapses are going to happen. I mean, at any point, this could happen to another village. What's going to happen to those people? I mean, a lot of those folks probably don't really have a lot of options to go anywhere else, which is particularly scary. And they're sitting ducks there. I want to talk about. You guys both mentioned
pipe in real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, Sharon.
In 2012, we had the first time that I can remember something called a derecho in Fort Wayne. The fact that we have now had one basically every year since 2012.
What's a derecho?
A derecho is, hello, weather nerd. A derecho is when you have straight line winds. I believe it's for more than 50 miles that exceed, they basically exceed hurricane force winds. It sounds like a tornado. It feels like a tornado. And the derecho in Fort Wayne took out electricity for a good number of people for, I think it was 2 weeks in July of 2012. It was not a fun experience. And it was the first time I had ever heard of that. Again, weather nerd. I know I hear about these things. I consume these things. And so the fact that I had never heard of it before was weird. And literally, it seems like every single year since 2012, there has been one that has gone through Indiana.
I was also always a weather nerd, Sharon, and I never remember having heard the word derecho until recent years. I had to look up how to pronounce it. I never heard of a polar vortex or a bomb cyclone. What the hell are those? Those are new. Those didn't happen. So either we've discovered new phenomena that we didn't have names for before, or the climate's changing and inventing new weather phenomena. I want to talk about you because you both mentioned the Indiana of it all. And of course, we're still cleaning up from our own climate change fueled natural disaster here. This week, President Trump approved a major disaster declaration for 21 counties, making FEMA assistance available to individuals and public entities in those areas. Early estimates put property damage at between $550 million and $5 billion. Even with the approval, more than 30 counties remain under review. Governor Mike Braun's August 20th request for a major disaster declaration covered 54 Indiana counties. Now, FEMA's Fred Kyler said, quote, "Nothing has been denied, but assessments are ongoing." Many residents of Northwest Indiana just had their power restored this Tuesday after 2 full weeks in the dark. NIPSCO, the monopoly utility in that area, saw 375,000 customers knocked offline and had to call in utility crews from as far away as Florida to help with restoration. Even with the power restored, residents will face lasting hardship, refrigerators full of spoiled food, displacement, unlivable habitation, and financial strain. Of course, children in Gary missed nearly 2 weeks of school. Sharon, I think now that The floodwaters have largely receded in most of the state. The power's back on up in Northwest Indiana. A lot of people are going to say, oh, I can look away. But this is going to be an ongoing recovery for a lot of folks. There's people who will never be able to move back into their houses. There's people who are going to be dealing with the effects of mold for years and years that we maybe don't even know about. I mean, you look 20 plus years on now at this point, New Orleans has still not recovered from Katrina. And I think if you look back a decade from now, there's going to be large parts of Indiana that has still not recovered from this event.
Well, and you're
not even, sorry, Sharon,
it's okay.
but not even to mention the psychological damage. I mean, I know people who lost everything. I cannot wrap my head around how, mentally speaking, that would be. But go ahead. I just want to pop that in.
Well, I was going to say that we're also hearing reports that there are, because those particular areas, so Muncie, I don't know how much it is in Anderson and Pendleton, but I've heard specific reports out of Muncie and out of Northwest Indiana. These are large areas of renters. Lots of people rent their homes. Landlords are not
heavily renter too.
Yeah, landlords are not required to rebuild. They can take their insurance money and go do whatever they want with it, which means these people not only have lost their home, it won't be rebuilt. They have nowhere to go, period. And they have no control over the fact that they have nowhere to go.
Also, on top of that, how many of these insurance companies, because most homeowners insurance companies have act of God exemptions. How many of them are going to try to claim, oh, this flood was an act of God?
Right.
Well, and floods specifically are not covered by most homeowners insurance policies.
I also learned that.
That is a separate policy you have to buy in a lot of places. Now, that's the gap that FEMA is supposed to cover, but we already know. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, right after this happened. Trump has gutted FEMA in this administration. That was one of the things that Elon Musk and his Doge boys hacked to pieces when they were in charge.
I think the proper term is Doge Bros.
Oh, my bad. But yes, so, we'll see. We've got this major disaster declaration from the administration, but will the support, both financial and material, come through? We're going to be waiting to see that. But I think a lot of people are going to be left short in many situations.
I also, before we transition to the next topic, I wanted to, so for those of you who don't know, I am now employed by the Anderson Community School Corporation. I'm a paraeducator. I work with students with behavioral difficulties. And I'd like to share an email that we got from Joe Cronk, our superintendent. Our request to the state to waive the instructional days missed on August 14th and August 17th due to the flooding has been denied. We were not singled out in this decision. I received a memo from the state indicating that they will only consider waiving instructional days after a school corporation has missed its first 5 days. In other words, a state would consider waiving days 6, 7, and 8, but not the first 5 missed days. That's
I saw your post about that.
Another headache.
Yeah, because now that's going to change any days that might have been quote unquote off during the year. If there's any snow days, which quite frankly, after the weather that we've seen this year, and then it's going to add days on to the end of the school year.
Yeah, I mean, and
the loss of pay as well.
Well, actually, thankfully, Friday was today, and I was paid for those 2 days. Thank the school board. But to give some more insight, Sharon, because of e-learning, Anderson only has one built-in snow makeup day. And so they're actually working with the Anderson Federation of Teachers to figure out, and parents, I might add, to figure out the best times to make up those days. And it could be one of our 3-day weekends disappearing, but it's just it's a headache for everybody. And like one of my colleagues said Friday at lunch, putting makeup days at the end of the school year makes absolutely no sense. You've already turned in your grades. You've already done final testing. What are you doing on that final day?
Right. Exactly. Well, and that, yeah. So having worked in the education system myself, like I've seen these things happen, for almost 20 years. And it's not a benefit to the kids, especially when so I'm a big fan of Maslow's hierarchy. So much so that I actually have it tattooed on my body in a unique way. But these kids that are going into school, like, let's say they can even go to school, like say school is fine, so they can go to school. If they are not able to eat because they don't have a place that they feel safe in, if they don't have comfort because they don't have a place that they feel safe in, they've been displaced, they've lost everything, these kids are not going to learn because they are not safe.
And working in an inner city school corporation really opens your eyes to that, because I mean, I came from Pendleton. I was in the South Madison Community School Corporation. We're a wealthy school corporation. I think I don't have any specific numbers, but like I would venture to say less than 20% of our students are on free and reduced lunch. A majority of the Anderson Community School Corporation students are on free and reduced lunch. I work with kids who are technically homeless because they do not have a stable home. And that is so, you don't have the basic needs met, you're not going to be able to learn. You're not going to want to learn.
And I went to school at Fort Wayne Community Schools, and we were, and still are, one of the school corporations in the state that is struggling the most. And so I did see it firsthand when I was growing up.
Things like these climate disasters are only going to exacerbate those problems as well. You mentioned homelessness. There are a lot of people who are essentially left homeless by these storms that went through and are still struggling with that, and will continue to struggle with that. So we talked about NIPSCO, and these storms have highlighted the fragility of our electric grid and the folly of entrusting its reliability to profit-maximizing investor-owned monopoly utilities. Governor Mike Braun this week directed the Indiana Office of Utility Consumer Counselor to file a complaint and petition the Utility Regulatory Commission to examine whether NIPSCO adequately maintained vegetation and rights-of-way, and whether funding regulators approved for reliability improvements was spent as promised. The request cites specific figures. NIPSCO customers paid over $81 million for vegetation management between 2023 and 2025, and the utility has been authorized roughly $2.3 billion in customer funds for infrastructure replacement since 2016. One IURC member who won't be participating in the inquiry, Andy Zay. We talked about this a few weeks ago. Braun fired Zay, the commission's chair, just months after appointing him and weeks after demoting him in the wake of the IURC approving a rate hike for another investor-owned utility, AES Indiana. Zay sued the governor for unlawful termination, but late last week settled the case with neither side admitting wrongdoing. Zay will receive $625,000, covering what would have been his full salary through 2030 plus legal fees. Now, Reece, I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but are these guys working in cahoots? Like this looks to me like essentially a no work, no pay $625,000 job at this point.
I don't know. I will be honest again. I've vaguely followed the AES stuff and this NIPSCO stuff, but I did want to butt in and ask for all the non-utilities nerds, what is vegetation management? Is that
Well,
like managing growth around
it's
like
yeah,
electrical?
making sure trees are trimmed back so they don't fall on power lines and things like those. Sharon, we about the vegetation management. That's not something we would have to worry about if our power lines were buried. That's something we really need to be thinking about going forward.
Mhm.
They're moving to do this in California because overhead power lines have caused massive wildfires there
Yep.
and caused tremendous amounts of damage. We're going to see this more and more disaster events that are going to, more derechos as they come through. We're going to knock down more trees and tear down more power lines. The problem is, it is always more profitable to just let things go for companies like this and deal with it later than it is to be proactive. And as long as we have for-profit investor-owned utilities instead of publicly owned utilities, we're going to get results like this.
Yeah, I actually lived in a home. Well, I've lived in two homes where, well, the derecho actually tore. Is that what it? There was a storm that in my first home as an adult, because of how the line came into the house, had to pay an electrician, had to do all those things. There's my second home that I lived in as an adult. We had lines that were going through the backyard. We had a bad storm that went through, lost power for, I think it ended up being about a week, maybe not have been quite a week, but a tree branch had fallen, and the electricity guys came through and said, happened to be friends with one of the neighbors, and said, hey, if you guys can get that branch off of the power line, we can actually we can get your power back more quickly. And we came together as neighbors and got the power line off of the or got the tree off of the power line. But most people don't have, first of all, close neighbors that they are willing to talk to those things about, or have, the tools necessary to be able to do that. And the thing is, these overhead power lines we see how they cause such dangerous situations for the average person, but as well as the electric workers who have to go in these situations. If you have a power line that's down and is just kind of flailing all over the place, it's not safe.
With this increased scrutiny we've seen placed on Indiana's public utilities from both sides of the political spectrum, investment analysts warned clients the Hoosier State might not be as rewarding a profit center in years to come. The Capital Chronicle had this story this week. So investment firms Wolf Research and Jeffries Research warned clients about Indiana utilities, citing, quote, political intervention after Zay's firing and discussion of lower regulator set profit rates. Wolf downgraded Indiana's regulatory independence rating from average to below average. Analysts noted investors are watching two ongoing IURC investigations into utility return on equity rates and cost recovery mechanisms as the state shifts to multi-year performance-based rate making. The Indiana Energy Association's Danielle McGrath said lower investor confidence and credit downgrades directly raise borrowing costs, which can, quote, show up on an electric bill at home. The Edison Electric Institute argued constrained profits could push capital elsewhere, making it costlier to maintain and strengthen the grid long term. Now, Sharon, this reads to me, and I encourage people to read this article. It seems like the vulture capitalist class complaining that they might not be able to shake every last penny out of Hoosier ratepayers anymore. Boo fucking who.
Yeah, which means that then our rates are only going to go up higher. Like, that's how I'm reading it, is that the rates are only going to go up higher. And this is something that we're already seeing. And this also does make me a little bit concerned for how homeowners insurance companies are going to respond to something like this. Is this also something that homeowners insurance companies look at and use to determine how much someone's homeowners insurance is going to cost? Or for landlords, how much their insurance is going to cost, which then they pass on to their renters.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Certainly, the insurance is a giant scam. Very much for the most part, like those companies are raking in the profits and increasingly paying out less and less to their policyholders and claims. And then Reece, we're seeing this, and this looks like they're complaining that they aren't going to get enough profit out of Indiana. Like they've been milking us, and God forbid that the stream get cut off just a little bit.
Oh, boo-hoo. They camped before the newest yacht. I actually, and I
My beach home. Oh no.
and I throw
It's
up in
gonna
my
get
mouth
washed away anyway.
a little bit, but I kind of agree with Braun a little bit. Like when he said
He's saying the right things.
yeah, utilities should earn reasonable returns. I don't think utilities should earn returns at all, because why are we profiting off of like necessary things that we have to have? Like, but yeah, I just it's hard to feel sad for these people. I go back to the I can't recall the name, but Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous.
Good Charlotte.
Thank you. They're always complaining. Always complaining.
Never enough.
Never enough. If money is not a
some
problem, they got too many mansions. Somebody should rob them. I don't advocate robbing anybody, but
no.
We're just quoting punk music right now. We're not advocating anything.
Yeah, that's the ticket. So let's move on to our next story, and the climate crisis. You know, we talked about it showing up on our power lines. Well, it's showing up in other unexpected places too. So this summer, we've been tracking a series of foodborne illness outbreaks, cyclosporiasis that has killed at least 2 people, listeria, salmonella, E. coli, and the slew of product recalls in response. Vox, that's with a V, not with an F, had a good explainer this week detailing the ways climate change is a major reason these outbreaks are becoming more prevalent. For example, experts say pathogens like cyclospora have been able to spread far beyond their traditional tropical range onto U.S. farms on a warming planet. And of course, it also doesn't help that the Trump administration has cut over 11,000 food safety jobs across the FDA and USDA and gutted the CDC's food parasite tracking program. So, with less inspection, it is particularly concerning that Trump is now looking to ease regulations on beef processing. He announced this week a plan to let farmers and ranchers process their own meat, touting the changes as a way to loosen the grip of the big 4 meat processing companies. A worthwhile goal, but at what cost? We already saw the USDA recall 30,000 pounds of Argentinian beef sold in Texas this week, just after the president announced a plan to allow up to 300,000 pounds more foreign beef into the market. That announcement angered cattle ranchers, so the decreased regulations may be a way to win them back. All of this, again, like we talked about with the Venezuelan oil earlier, reeks of market manipulation, trying to lower the price of beef heading into the election. Sharon, am I looking too much into that?
No, you're not. It feels like he's trying to manufacture another pandemic, which I guess sounds a little bit alarmist and conspiracy theorist, but that's what it feels like he's trying to do. It seems like he's not just trying to market manipulate. It seems like he's trying to science manipulate and feel like how, like what can he do to play God, essentially. Like this goes back to his playing of God. Now I will say, as a native Hoosier, we do have access to beef farms. Like I have in the past gotten a quarter beef from a local beef farmer, which is then processed at a local meat market. We are lucky in that regard in Indiana because we can probably access local beef relatively easily. Other people across the country do not have that advantage, and so that does make this like it's this double-edged sword, right? Because in Indiana, we look at it and go, oh, our beef farmers process their own meat all the time, or they have a local butcher do it. And so why is this a big deal? But then you have a place like, say, Washington State, where I don't know if Washington State has beef farmers or not, but they're going to have less than Indiana does. And so it's a problem. it's another one of those NIMBY things, not in my back. Okay, not technically NIMBY, I guess. But it's a situation where we look at it in Indiana and go, well, that's not that big a deal. But to New Mexico, it's a massive deal because they don't have that type of agriculture.
Yeah. And listen, I am also in favor, to Trump's point, of breaking up the monopoly or oligopoly power of these big four packing firms. Great. But who's going to inspect all these little independent farmers and ranchers? We're already seeing the increase in foodborne illness with the decrease in inspections. Reece, listen, what can you eat safely at this point? What are you confident in buying at the grocery store?
Ramen,
French fries, everything bad.
This is also a great PSA for why one should garden, because you can have your own food.
If you have the ability to, yes. A lot of people don't have that ability.
That caveat, yes. But to Sharon's point, same here. We have Smith Family Farms. They've got a meat market in Pendleton. We are able to drive down 5 minutes from our house and buy a slab of beef. And to both of your points, I'm not against allowing small beef farmers and small farmers from processing their own meat. I think I don't, however, like the trust me, bro, inspection method, and
it's going so well.
And it sucks to say that, like, while I am sure there are hundreds and probably thousands of small farms out there that will be diligent, that will seek out, there are going to be a handful of larger farms that ruin it for everybody because they want more profits, and so they're not going to take as much time or put as much energy and effort into ensuring that their meats are packaged correctly and that their beef and chicken are free of diseases and whatnot. And it's just, with a lot of things, regulation is so complicated because we have to have regulation. We have to have somebody overseeing and saying, yep, this is safe to eat. At the same time, overregulation can be a burden for anybody. But the answer to overregulation is not get rid of regulation altogether, because then we get cyclospora. Because wasn't one of the regulatory agencies or commissions or whatever that was cut direct, like one of their focuses was monitoring cyclospora.
Yep.
And
that was that food parasite tracking program.
Yeah. And it's like,
and
what? But I mean, granted,
RFK
Jr.
It is fuck around, find out in real time, right? Yeah. Except they fucked around and now we're all finding out. Along those lines, so, of course, gutting food safety isn't the only harm caused by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. over at the Department of Health and Human Services. He has also fostered an environment of distrust around vaccines. Now, it was bad enough when he did so as a private individual, but from a position of authority, it has led to disaster. Now, this week, Pennsylvania announced 2 measles-associated deaths, the first in the state in 35 years. One of the victims, and this is heartbreaking, was a newborn who died from a ruptured spleen and tested positive for measles in a post-mortem exam. Measles can cause inflammation of the spleen. RFK Jr. accused Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's administration of potentially having fabricated the deaths and claimed the state wasn't cooperating with the CDC. Pennsylvania health officials say they have been in regular contact with the CDC throughout. Vaccine expert Dr. Paul Offit said the patients, quote, would not have died were it not for measles, but did criticize the state for not releasing more details, saying vague information helps anti-vaccine advocates misdirect and dispute the deaths. Now, I mentioned the harm Kennedy perpetuated before his government role. News on that this week, as a letter obtained by The Guardian showed Kennedy lied during his confirmation hearing about a trip he took to Samoa in 2019. Kennedy traveled to the Pacific Island nation to perpetuate vaccine conspiracies just months before a measles outbreak there killed 83 people. Despite Kennedy insisting he traveled to the islands to, quote, introduce a medical informatics system, the letter shows he told Samoa's prime minister he wanted to study the MMR vaccine using the words vaccine or vaccination 8 times. Senator Ron Wyden is calling for a criminal investigation, while Senators Markey and also Brooks, as well as Hawaii Governor Josh Green, are calling for RFK's resignation. And, you know, Reece, I join them in calling for RFK's resignation. I think he is criminally negligent in addition to being guilty, it appears, of lying to Congress during his confirmation hearing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first off, when I heard about the infant's death, heartbreaking. And also, fuck you, RFK Jr., for trying to claim that it was fabricated. I don't know any decent human being who would like to try and fabricate the death of anybody, let alone a newborn. But to go on to the Senate confirmation hearings, I saw it and I'm like, my first reaction was, oh boy, I'm so surprised. I think any intelligent person could have connected the dots and seen that, and just based on who Kennedy is, and like, he cannot not talk about vaccines and how they cause autism and whatever. Are we surprised? No. I think we should investigate, because if we don't, it sets a terrible precedent that one can lie to Congress and one can get away with it. So, will anything happen?
Yeah. Oh, go. Sorry, Reece.
Who knows? Should something
Sharon,
happen?
RFK
Definitely.
says that the cure for the measles is vitamin A and chicken soup. But what is the cure for RFK?
Strong shot of whiskey.
For him or for us?
Yeah,
Us.
Okay. Kennedy is part of this family that has this, very decorated history in American politics. And he's just done a really good job undoing all of that. Anybody who would chicken soup and vitamin A, as someone who couldn't have my own children, it hits me particularly hard, because I know how difficult it is I know how difficult pregnancy is. And so to go through pregnancy and then lose your child so soon after them being born as a result of something that is conceivably, it's not conceivably, it is, what's the word I'm looking for? Preventable. Preventable, is just, it's absurd. I am such a believer in, I was raised in a very strong Christian home, but I was raised by, people who believed in the science. I was fully vaccinated. And it also goes back to, is autism really worse than losing your child? Like let's say vaccines do cause autism. They don't, but let's say they do. Is it worse than losing your kid, especially in the way that this little one was lost?
Yeah, it's very sad. The human toll we're seeing taken by this anti-science rhetoric that has really just increased in the last couple of years. But this sort of anti-vaccine push has gone back a couple decades now at this point, and we really got to squash that and get back to just believing and trusting in the science. So let's move on. And in addition to missing critical vaccinations, what else is harmful to children? Social media. This week, Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, agreed to an $18 billion settlement with 48 states as well as DC and 3 territories over claims that their products harmed children. This is Meta's largest child safety payment to date and will be doled out in installments over 10 years. Now, as part of the settlement, Meta denies any wrongdoing. The underlying lawsuit was filed in 2023 by 29 states, citing violations of child privacy laws. New Mexico wasn't part of the settlement. A separate federal ruling there declared Meta a public nuisance and ordered nearly $1 billion in fines. And we talked about that a couple months ago. Evidence in the trial included internal documents all the way up to CEO Mark Zuckerberg, including research stating, quote, teens have an addict's narrative about use, and testimony that safety features were deprioritized partly to shield the company from future lawsuits. Oops. Now, new safety features will be mandated as part of the settlement, including things like night mode blocking notifications between midnight and 6 a.m., a 2-hour daily time limit, hidden likes for teens, school hour notification muting, usage time prompts, a non-algorithmic feed option. I would like that one. And removal of extreme makeup filters. Indiana, is it, for its portion of the settlement, could receive between $246 and $419 million, according to Attorney General Todd Rokita, who called it a, quote, milestone victory for Hoosier families. Now, Reece, listen, I don't know how they are going to do this age verification. What is going to stop kids from just saying they're 21 years old or whatever? I mean, yeah, they've been doing it for as long as there's been social media at this point.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, not to get too whatever, but what's just like with explicit content laws and verification IDs on pornographic sites, what's to stop them from turning on a VPN and saying that they are in one of the 2 states that is not covered by this requirement, or are in Canada, which I don't know what the regulations are, but like what's to stop that? And like, to your point, how do we prove that somebody is, 8 or what was it, 12 to 17 or whatever? Are we gonna have them scan their birth certificate? Are we gonna have them enter in their social security number? What, like, and then that gets into the whole question of, well, okay, but now they have all this data on us, and it's, I mean,
this goes back to what was going on with Discord earlier this year, where they said because of European regulations, they were going to start to require that in the United States that we have to scan our driver's license or scan an ID in order to use Discord. That went away real quick, right? Because there was a rise up about privacy concerns. That's, like you're saying, Reece, that seems like that's the direction this is going, but we've already seen what happens given the Discord situation earlier this year.
And listen, all this social media stuff, it's not just poisoning children's minds, right? I mean, we've seen an entire generation of my parents' age get brainwashed by AI slop and foreign influence operations on Facebook. I don't know. I think some sort of verification for everybody to prove that there are real people that you're interacting with on these social media sites might be worth something looking into as well. There's so many bots and sock puppet accounts. I don't know. The whole thing could go away, and we'd probably be in a better place as a world. But on
that, I just talking about bots and whatnot. I got a friend request yesterday from an account that was created that day, but was using one of my friends' profile pictures, and then identified themselves as that person. I was able to spot that it was a fake because of, thankfully, technology literacy and whatnot. But it happens. And I mean, one thing I will forever rail against with Facebook is that the option to mark a post as containing AI content is optional.
Yeah. And the people who benefit from presenting AI content as something real certainly aren't going to market as such. Now, listen, we talked about this this big settlement that the states are going to receive. What are they going to spend it on? What have we spent previous settlement money on? I'm linking an article in the show notes from Mother Jones that finds that police are spending opioid settlement funds on flock cameras. At least 19 law enforcement agencies across 10 states spent over $920,000 in opioid settlement funds on flock and similar AI license plate readers since 2024, and that is likely an undercount given the inconsistent expenditure tracking. Local officials often justified the spending by linking cameras to drug trafficking enforcement. The surveillance industry has actively marketed itself to police for this purpose. 6 agencies also used opioid funds for Peregrine Technologies, an AI surveillance integration platform. This week, Bill Gates is coming out and suggesting we need more regulation and more limits on AI. He published a 6,000-word essay arguing AI needs significant limits, warning, quote, AI will either be the greatest equalizer ever invented or the worst source of injustice. And I could go on more and more about this, but I kind of want to cut this discussion a little bit short because we do need to start moving on. But Sharon, I don't think that these flock cameras is the best use of opioid settlement money. We should be spending that on things like treatment and addiction services.
Right. They should be connected to what the settlement money was for. And I mean, as you were going through the amount of money that's being given for the Facebook settlement, is that money going to be given back to the families? Is that money, oh, it's a baby. Is that money going to be given like to programs where, oh my goodness, going to be used to create programs to help people overcome? Is it going to be used to help? I mean, I'm with you. I would love to go back to having my feed just be my friends. And I have found some really cool things on Facebook because of the stuff it's fed me, but I could also live without it pretty easily. And I especially like, so here in Fort Wayne, our city council voted down extending the flock contract, but there doesn't seem to be any information on what that actually means. So it seems in some ways almost performative rather than actually something that they're going to take action on. And it's just one of those things where I need to, if there's going to be settlement funds, I need to see the connection between where the purchasing is being made and how it's being used in order to say that otherwise, what does it matter? The other question I have is, what are the 2 states that were not involved in the settlement, and why did they choose to not be involved?
Well, I want to say it was New Mexico and Texas, and one of them, New Mexico, I had mentioned that they had sued Meta separately and received a settlement for that. But, listen, as long as it's more profitable for the companies to just settle out of court on these things, pay a big fine, and keep making billions and billions of dollars, they're not going to change their behavior. They're just going to keep misbehaving, and these settlements are just going to be a cost of doing business. I have to move on, so we need to talk about Trump's war on voting. And at the end of last week, the Supreme Court's conservative majority lifted a lower court injunction blocking Trump's executive order, which required the United States Postal Service to use state voter lists to screen absentee ballots. But the ruling was procedural, finding the injunction premature before the USPS had finalized its rule, not exactly ruling on the order's legality. So after that, the USPS did publish the final 90-page ruling on its voter absentee ballot handling. And under the rule, USPS would refuse to deliver ballots from states that don't comply with the new federal standards, including providing lists of voters who receive mailed ballots and unique barcodes tied to outbound and return ballot envelopes. Now, the U.S. says it won't collect party affiliation or inspect ballot contents, only looking at the exterior envelope data. And officials say this is meant to verify ballots sent match to what the states report. Now, after the Supreme Court lifted its injunction on the prior ruling, we've got another ruling from Judge Indira Tawani in Boston, who blocked implementation of this voting order for 2 weeks. Now that case will go to the First Circuit Court of Appeals. Only after this eventually gets to the Supreme Court, and it will they rule on the legality of Trump's mail-in voting crackdown and using the USPS to do so. Now, why is Trump doing this? Well, he cites a report from the U.S. Census Bureau published earlier this month titled Non-Citizen Voting in the 2020 Election, a Beginning Analysis, in which they claim over 24,000 non-citizen voters voted illegally in the 2020 election. This is based on over 128 million voter records in the federal data. Now, election experts called the methodology of this study unreliable. And even if it were, and it is not, 24,000 out of 128 million is 0.02% of the votes cast by illegal voters. And again, they were not. The methodology on this was faulty. But the point stands. They are trying to mess with this year's election. Reece, they are sowing the seeds to claim fraud once again.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the when did he do his big, was it in July? His big press conference where he the one that I turned into a fun drinking game and got extremely drunk because Trump says so much stupid shit.
The election was stolen by China. Yeah.
But, I mean, just going back to mail-in voting, are there probably some problems with it? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not a voting expert. But guess who voted by mail recently? Donald fucking Trump. It was reported that he voted by mail in Florida's primary election. It's the whole rules for thee but not for me sort of thing, and it's just it is laughably sad, and I do worry. I worry for the 26 election, and I really do worry for the 28 election. Are we, I knock on goddamn fucking wood, I hope we don't see another January 6th, but like, if Trump loses, I mean, hopefully he's not going to be on the ballot, but like, if his handpicked predecessor or successor loses, is he going to give up power peacefully? Is he going to, what is going to happen? And I think that's a question that not a lot of us want to think about right now, but it's a question we need to start thinking about because it has a lot of implications.
That we even need to, right? And
yeah, I mean, but this is Trump, so thinking about these sort of things has sort of become par for the course, unfortunately. So,
well, and it's not just the mail-in stuff, right? Like there is also an in-person component of this. Sharon, I don't know if you saw this one, but out of Wyoming, they held their primaries last week. We talked about it a little bit on the show, but the clerk in Laramie County, that's Cheyenne, the most populous county in the state, said that 2 federal monitors there, they withheld their credentials initially, tried to interview voters and inspect vote tabulators. All of this is barred under Wyoming law. Now, the DOJ said the operation was coordinated with its Civil Rights Division to ensure, quote, transparency, ballot security, and strict compliance with federal voting rights statutes, and defended the monitors as fully aligned with their mission. But even Wyoming's own Homeland Security Director and our Attorney General and some county clerks said they hadn't been informed in advance that this was going to happen. I'm worried, Sharon, that you're going to see more of this at polling places across the country in November. You know, they're trying it out in maybe a friendly locale in Wyoming in the primaries, but where are you going to see this intimidation in November?
They're trying it out. They're trying it out in a friendly locale.
Yeah.
And they're trying it out in a less populated locale in hopes, I think, that it wouldn't have gotten reported, or at least not reported in this way where it became national news. Although, actually, based on where you got this from, it doesn't appear that it did, or that it was national news technically.
It was not widely reported. Yeah, no, but
right.
This is a trial run. You got to watch out for stuff like this in places like Atlanta, Detroit, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, big population centers, blue cities in swing states.
Well, and here's the other thing I worry about. Okay, so we know that this was a test run, right? But what about people who look at this and go, oh, we're going to go pretend to do this because, and not actually be associated with the federal government at all, but then go so fear among people because they, and this is me definitely falling under we're hitting the conspiracy theories hard this morning.
No, we saw it in Arizona a couple years ago. Yeah.
And so these people have now basically gotten away with it. As, I mean, have we even confirmed that these people were from the federal government? And if they have, okay, great, whatever. But are people going to look at this and go, hey, they got away with it. Let's see what we can get away with, acting as, you know, Trump's associates, even if they have nothing to do with that. And then what are those people who are faking it going to do?
Very scary. So I want to talk about voting in Indiana in particular. Now, this is a major component of the Secretary of State's race this year. This week, Greg Ballard, the independent Lincoln Party candidate, unveiled a prototype for a state-produced precinct-level voter guide, which will include sample ballots, candidate information, polling locations, and election date reminders for every voter in the state. Now, he said the guide would be nonpartisan, with 150-word candidate blurbs, barring attacks on opponents, and it would also have a companion app that goes along with it. Now, the 4 candidates for Secretary of State debated on Thursday night at a Hobnob event hosted by the Indy Chamber, it's called, and this was one of the things they discussed there. Both Republican Max Engling and Democrat Bo Bai called the plan too expensive and unnecessary. Candidates also fought about the recount in District 23, where Paula Copenhaver overtook incumbent state senator Spencer Deary by 3 votes after certain ballots were disqualified over a missing clerk stamp. Only Engling seemed to think this was okay, as the other 3 candidates all came out in favor of voter intent counting over any minor clerk mishaps affecting voter tabulation. All 4 candidates agreed on requiring business filings to list actual owners rather than register agents, and all committed to serving, all at least implied they would serve 4-year terms if elected. Engling criticized Ballard's Lincoln Party for lacking a clear platform. Ballard would need 2% of the vote for the party to gain automatic future ballot access, 10%, and they would be considered a major party under Indiana state law. Sharon, I, for one, think the ballot book is a great idea, and I don't know why the Democratic candidate can't get behind it.
I think that the ballot book is an excellent idea. We see how effective this is in other states where it's just become commonplace for a ballot book to be sent out. I've seen where, blaming voter turnout, blaming apathy, blaming all kinds of other things for why voters aren't going out and voting. But if they don't know that, and the thing is, it's not apathy. It is absolutely not apathy. It is a populace that is currently overtaxed, there's things coming at them from all directions, and they don't know what to focus on at the same time that they are trying to keep their families fed. They're trying to keep roof over people's heads. They're trying to pay for their utilities, so on and so forth. That is not a populace that's apathetic. That's a populace that is trying to survive. And if we do this ballot, or if we have a ballot book, this just makes it a little bit easier for them to find out the information that they need. There are plenty, and I think it's wonderful that an app is a potential idea, while also sending out something in print for our Hoosiers that aren't on the internet. Because guess what? There are plenty of our Hoosiers that are not on the internet, either due to age or due to accessibility based on where they live in the state. And so we can't just rely. I see in the show notes that you talk about how Schilling says that the Indiana voters at IN.gov site already has a lot of this information. Yeah, it does. Great. But if you can't access the internet, then you can't access that website.
Well, and it does have those things, but it doesn't have like the official candidate descriptions.
No.
Both Engling and Bai, I believe, cited the cost, which is about $2.5 million.
$3 million. We've
which
spent
is
more money for
small
less.
beans in government process spending. But Reece, they also say, to Sharon's point, that information is available elsewhere. A lot of nonprofits put it out, but we are inundated with information. We're also inundated with misinformation. It would be good to have something official that you can trust.
And again, those not-for-profits are doing it online. They're not doing it in print. Sorry, Reece.
No, you're good. You actually gave me a bit more time to go on to the indianavoters.in.gov to try and find who's on my ballot. I've clicked like 5 buttons and I'm still not. Oh, there we go. Who's on my ballot? I finally got to it. It's not a simple process. Going back to Bobot, there's a lot to criticize Bobai on. I hear that and I fall within a lot of those criticisms. I think it was just plain fucking stupid that he can't get behind this. His
Democrats
argument
do better when more people vote. We would want more people to vote, and part of that would be giving them more information. I worry with him that he's just like, he has to try to play conservative because he thinks that's what's going to get him elected here. And if that's too expensive, I'm a fiscal conservative. He thinks that's going to resonate with certain people. Guess what? The people with whom that resonates aren't going to vote for you anyway. The left lane's wide open, my guy. Driving.
And like he has, to give him a bit of a point, there are going to be a lot of people who get it, and like with most pieces of mail they get, trash. And so theoretically speaking, yes, we are gonna be spending money on something that a lot of people are just gonna put right in the trash. But that completely ignores the 30 or 40% of the people who actually go, oh, this is cool. Let me read it. Oh, this is my last day to register to vote. I didn't realize that. Let me make sure my registration's up to date. This is when early voting begins. Awesome. This is who's on my ballot. My biggest worry for this, and I'm all for ballot books, is the nonpartisan aspect. How do we ensuring that it's nonpartisan? Because there are so many different ways in formatting, in placements, in whatnot, that one can slyly make one person more appealing than the other. And so
Yeah, and that is a
I-
legitimate concern.
I worry about that, but like neither of those concerns. 2.5 million. We have what, $4 billion in our state surplus?
Not to mention the 419 million that's coming from the settlement, the meta settlement. We could use 3 million of that to make the ballot book that will then educate our populace more.
Or maybe
Certainly better use of our funds than flock cameras for sure.
Or maybe
we've only got a little
Mike
bit of time, so
could pay us back for the fucking helipad that he built on his property and all of the helicopter. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. So I do have to move on. We're talking about voting, and several states did hold elections this week. In Georgia, there was a special election for the 13th congressional district. The runoff took place this Tuesday, where Democrat Everton Blair won the seat over fellow Democrat Marcy Scott, taking 52% of the vote. Now, this is filling the seat left vacant by the death of Representative David Scott in April. Blair will only serve through the remainder of the term, which ends at the beginning of January. Neither candidate is running for the full term. Voters will choose that seat's next occupant separately in November. Now, in Oklahoma, there was a runoff for the state Senate primary there, where Democratic Socialist Nikila Jasmine Thomas won the Democratic nomination, defeating Jim Priest, despite being significantly outspent. Thomas is a Chickasaw Nation member and, like I said, self-described Democratic Socialist. She backs Medicare for all, universal child care, and paid parental leave, and abolishing ICE. Now, she will face the heavily favored Republican Representative Kevin Hern in the fall. This seat was left open when Mark Wayne Mullen was promoted to be the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security under President Trump. Also, a runoff election in South Carolina this week on the Republican side, where incumbent Senator Darlene Graham, who is serving in her late brother's seat in an interim capacity, defeated Representative Ralph Norman in the Senate primary runoff there. This is for the full term beginning in January. Now, during his concession speech, Norman questioned why President Trump pushed so hard for Graham to enter this race, and Trump was booed by Republican supporters in that, even as Norman praised Trump's policies. Trump can't resist. He responded on Truth Social the next day, claiming Norman ruined his career when he endorsed Nikki Haley during the 2024 Republican primary. Now, Darlene Graham's own victory speech went viral as she railed against government health care as an evil, supported by her general election opponent, Dr. Annie Andrews. Graham talks about the evils of government-run healthcare and how important it is for you to work hard even when you're sick, like her parents did. The irony is that Graham's parents died very, very young, having worked themselves to death because they didn't have access to healthcare. That, it seems, is Graham's plan going into November. South Carolina, Sharon, very red state, but this is, work yourselves to death until you die in your 50s doesn't seem like a very appealing general election platform, at least to me.
It doesn't to me either. It absolutely doesn't to me, as someone who lost her father when he was 51 years old.
Yeah, very, very scary. What these people want to do with us, and they seem to advocate that is some sort of like noble way to live one's life, and I don't think anybody wants that. We've seen the rest of the world with their government-run healthcare has better outcomes at a better price, it turns out, than what Americans are paying for their health care. Reece, really quick, thoughts on Democratic Socialist Nikila Jasmine Thomas winning the Democratic nomination there in Oklahoma?
I think I've been really actually kind of curious about, or not curious, but it's one of the things that I've been following is DSA members winning and or losing primary elections. I don't think we're going to see a Senator Thomas because it's Oklahoma, and it's Oklahoma. But I think it does do a lot to show that the base is wanting change, is wanting something new. I think we should also, I think it's also worth mentioning that this was a 31-year-old versus a 70-year-old. The age question has also been a big one. If her opponent had instead been a 40-year-old, what would we have seen a closer competition? But I think, regardless of what you think about democratic socialism, the DSA, etc., I think the big thing it does expose is people in the Democratic Party, the base, because that's who turns out to vote in primary elections, is the base, are the diehards, want change. They are tired of the it's a big club, the old boys network, the wink and a nod. And so I think
that very old boys club that we talked about at the beginning of the show with Hakeem Jeffries, right? And palling around with folks like Jared-Kushner. Just a couple minutes here, and before we go, we have to mention we did lose a couple of legends this week. On Tuesday, the universally beloved Dolly Parton passed away at age 80. I will link to the obituary from the Associated Press in the show notes, which highlights her very long career, all of the Grammys she won, the movies she was in. Talks very much about her philanthropy, all the money she donated to important causes, including her Imagination Library, which has distributed over 200 million books to children since 1995. The next day,
I would like to point out that Mike Braun did not match fundings for when given the
thanks,
chance.
Mike Braun. We'll remember that in a couple of years when you're up for re-election. The next day, ironically, I think a Texas judge cited Dolly Parton in striking down that state's ban on drag performances. Dolly Parton was a big advocate of the LGBTQ community, which she tried to stay apolitical through most of her career, and didn't really say where she came down, Democrat or Republican, but she did stick her neck out for the LGBTQ community. Finally, speaking of men who look fabulous in women's clothing, the next day, Tim Curry also passed away at age 80. Of course, best known for playing Dr. Frank-N-Furter in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Curry also had a long career on stage and screen alike. He suffered a major stroke in 2012, which left him wheelchair dependent, but he continued his voice work and made public appearances over these last several years. Reece, thoughts on either Curry or Parton before we have to wrap up here?
Well, I think the afterlife is having a party right now. The world might have lost two wonderfully talented performers, but the afterlife gained two wonderfully talented performers. Before I turn it over to Shane, my favorite fun fact, or new favorite fun fact that I learned about Dolly Parton following her death, she once entered a Dolly Parton lookalike contest, lost to a drag queen.
Oh my gosh!
And there are pictures out there of the two of them. And when I saw it, it took me a hot second to say, "Oh yeah, that's Dolly Parton," because the drag queen.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Sharon,
it's.
You see the meme, right? And it's the Grim Reaper playing the crane game, and it's like, blank is blank even in this thing. These things tend to come in threes. There's another 80-year-old out there that we would much rather see go than these two legends.
Well, and the third did happen the day after Tim Curry, the voice of Optimus Prime,
Andy Orr.
Thank you. Andy Orr last name is, I want to say it's Stephen Cullen.
Peter Cullen.
Peter Cullen, thank
yes.
you. He passed away. So we did have our three people who I would argue made significant contributions to our culture today, and to a little bit of joy. A little bit, like all three of them were just people who were involved in bringing joy to others. And like Reece said, they're having a party up in the afterlife right now. And I, much like when my grandparents passed away, I am glad that they are no longer in pain. I'm glad that they are, they're able to be back with whatever loved ones they were with. Because, Dolly Parton lost her husband a couple years ago, who was famously not public. And I imagine that they are just enjoying time together now. And we've lost some of that joy in the world, but we get to
may their memories be blessings to all of us. So, hey, where can the folks find the two of you before we have to wrap up here? Sharon, you're running for office up there. Direct people to your campaign website. How can they donate, volunteer, all that good stuff?
So www.electsharonwight, that's WIGHT.com. If you are in the Fort Wayne area and you are watching, or if you want to drive to the Fort Wayne area, what Allen County is doing is we're doing different days of action for different candidates. One of my days of action is next Saturday. So in the Washington Township area in Fort Wayne, Indiana, if you would like to come and participate, we can use as many volunteers to go knock on some doors and talk to some people about what they would like to see change in the upcoming election. So that is the biggest thing that I've got upcoming, is my day of action next Saturday.
Very good. Thank you very much. And Reece, how about you? You're writing on the Substack these days.
I am on the Substack these days. At Reece's Piece, that's REC, not S-E, and then Peace, P-E-A-C-E. Little play on words there. Facebook, which is just my name. Those are the main two places. I've got hopefully a couple projects in the works, but I don't know when anything will happen with those. But yes, go do Sharon's, because Sharon seems to be doing a whole lot more like direct impact things than me vomiting my opinions onto the internet.
Why not both? Do both. Read Reece's Mind Vomit and also volunteer for Sharon's campaign, or donate if you're not in the area. As for me, of course, you can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us, and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Send me a DM with feedback, or email me at scott@whosleft.us. We can't do all we do here without your support. Please help Progressive Indiana Network out with a paid subscription. The website, again, is progressiveindiana.net. Follow us on social media at the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it is PIN Indiana. Please, again, help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Thanks again to Sharon and Reece for joining us. Thank you for watching or listening. Again, donate, volunteer for Sharon. Read what Reece has to say. Like, share, comment, review for us. Let's keep building a radically democratic Indiana together. Until next time, I am Scott Aaron Rogers signing off from Bloomington. Love each other, Indiana.